Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, a book he never meant for anyone to read, that the men who challenged him taught him more about himself than the ones who praised him. He didn't thank them. He studied them. Because he understood something most men never figure out: your enemies are doing you a service your friends are too afraid to perform. By the end of this video you'll know exactly how to extract intelligence about yourself from the people who oppose you, why that information is more accurate than anything your friends will ever tell you, and how to use it to become someone your enemies didn't expect. Your enemies have no incentive to flatter you, which makes them the most honest mirror you'll ever look into. Nietzsche's academic rivals attacked his work as undisciplined, emotional, and lacking rigor. His friends called it brilliant. He listened to his critics. Not because they were right about everything, they weren't, but because buried inside their contempt was a specific complaint he could test. He refined his thinking not by defending himself to allies, but by interrogating what his opponents actually found threatening. That tension produced some of the sharpest philosophy of the 19th century. Friends operate under a social contract. They need you to like them back. That need distorts their feedback at the source. An enemy has no such contract. They will tell you exactly what they see: your insecurity, your weakness, your inconsistency, because they're not managing your emotions, they're managing their own advantage. Strip out the malice and what you have left is data. Raw, unfiltered, often painful data. That's worth more than 10 compliments from people who need something from you. The specific nature of an attack tells you where your real power lives. Seneca was exiled twice. His political enemies didn't attack him for being mediocre, they attacked him for being influential, for his wealth, for his proximity to power. If he'd been a nobody, they wouldn't have bothered. The viciousness of the opposition was, paradoxically, a map of his actual value. Caesar's enemies assassinated him because of what he represented, not because of what he lacked. You don't waste energy destroying something that doesn't threaten you. Think about it this way: when someone attacks you, they're revealing what they perceive as dangerous about you. Jealousy has a target. Resentment has a cause. If a colleague undermines you at work, they're telling you they see you as competition. If someone mocks a decision you made, they're often reacting to something in it that they wish they had the courage to do. The attack is a reaction, and every reaction has a source. Learn to trace it back and you'll find a strength you probably weren't fully aware of. Your enemies expose the gap between who you think you are and who you actually are in the world. There's a common scenario most men in their 30s hit. You think of yourself as calm, reasonable, easy to work with. Then someone who doesn't like you describes you to a mutual friend as controlling and difficult to approach. Your first instinct is to dismiss it: they're just biased. But then you sit with it. And you start to notice the moments when you do take over conversations, when you do get rigid about process, when people do go quiet around you. Your friend never told you this. They saw it, but they didn't want the awkwardness. Your enemy had no such hesitation. Jung called this the shadow, the parts of yourself you've disowned or are blind to. The people who love you have usually accommodated your shadow without naming it. They work around your blind spots because the relationship matters more to them than the truth. An enemy has no such loyalty. They will walk directly into your blind spot and make it visible. Carl Jung spent decades arguing that self-knowledge requires confronting what's uncomfortable. Your enemies are accelerating that process whether you ask them to or not. How you respond to an enemy is one of the most honest tests of your actual values. Epictetus was a slave. He had enemies by definition, men with legal power over his body. What he understood, and what he built his entire philosophy around, was that the only domain he controlled was his response. He couldn't control what they did. He could control what it made him. The Stoics weren't passive about this, they were intensely deliberate. They used opposition as a training ground. Marcus Aurelius wrote about difficult people not as problems to avoid but as exercises in the practice of virtue. You can't practice patience with people who never test it. When someone challenges you, you find out in real time what you're actually made of, not what you believe about yourself in comfortable moments, but what you default to under pressure. Do you get petty? Do you catastrophize? Do you go silent? Do you overreact and damage yourself more than they did? Each reaction is information. The man who can observe his own responses to opposition without flinching is building something most men never have: accurate self-knowledge under pressure. That's not soft psychology. That's strategic. Knowing your enemy's perception of you lets you control the narrative before they do. Machiavelli wasn't advocating cruelty in The Prince, he was documenting reality. He observed that rulers who understood how they were perceived by their adversaries could shape that perception strategically. The ones who got blindsided were always the ones operating on flattery instead of intelligence. Theodore Roosevelt knew exactly what his political opponents said about him behind closed doors. He used that knowledge to get ahead of their attacks, reframe the story, and build a public image that neutralized their leverage. When you know how your enemies see you, you can make a deliberate choice. Is their perception accurate and something to fix, or is it inaccurate and something to correct publicly before it spreads? Ignorance of how you're perceived is a strategic liability. It lets other people write your story. The man who regularly seeks out critical feedback, even from people who don't like him, is the man who controls the narrative of who he is, because he's not surprised by it. 3 things to take away from this. First, your enemies will tell you the truth your friends won't, because they have nothing to lose by being honest. Collect that intelligence instead of defending against it. Second, the specific nature of an attack reveals the nature of your real power. Opposition is a map. Third, your response to an enemy is a direct readout of your actual values, not the ones you claim. Use that data. The Stoics weren't just philosophers sitting in gardens, they were men building rigorous systems for living in a world that didn't accommodate weakness. What they understood was that self-knowledge is the foundation of everything else, and the fastest path to it runs directly through your enemies. If this resonated, subscribe. We drop one every Tuesday and Friday. And if you want to go deeper, the next video is about why the men ancient philosophers called the most dangerous weren't the ones with the most power, they were the ones who had the least left to lose.